I'd like to welcome you back to the Mirage Universe, another classic. It's the boy Blackbeard, the occult historian. Let's get into the history. Today I want to give you some more insight on the American Revolution. This is the most important war and all the wars that came from this to quote unquote black people. Here's why I say this. Quote unquote black people are not from Africa. Let me repeat. Quote unquote black people are not from Africa. They are from America. Okay. So that means the American Revolution has something to do with you. Only thing is we got to figure out how, where, when, why, who, and to what extent. And we're about to get into that right now. All right. Here's the book I'm coming out of. America, A Narrative History, 7th edition in volume 1. I want to kind of lead you into what happened and the background of the story before I read. Long story short, it's simple. You all are American Aboriginals, all right? Or American Aborigine, Autochthonous American, Aboriginal Indigenous American, etc. All right. And long story short, some foreigners came. They tried to settle some places. There was some agreements, some disagreements. Next thing you know, it leads to conflict. Very, very simple. Nothing too deep about that. All right. So now we're going to go into the preliminary or the prelude to the fighting of the American Civil War. American Civil War, because that's actually part 2 of the American Revolution, along with the French and Indian War. But right now we're talking about the American Revolution from the date, we can say the late 1400s. So with quote unquote black people or Negro people or African American people, the American Revolution or the first war for you started in the late 1400s. Okay. Early 1500s. And we're going to read into the history. All right. The collusion of cultures, the American Aboriginals culture, your culture prior to the arrival of Europeans. There were over 500 languages spoken here, multiple forms of spirituality. You had mystery systems. You can see the serpent mystery systems all across America. America or Amaru Maru, known as land of the plumed serpents. Look at the science of Quetzalcoatl down in South America, etc. So it was multiple things we were doing here. And, nevertheless, let me get into the reading. I don't want to blabber my mouth too much. By far, however, the most significant aspect of the biological exchange was the transmission of infectious diseases from Europe and Africa to the New World. European colonists and enslaved Africans brought with them deadly pathogens that Native Americans had never experienced: smallpox, typhus, diphtheria, bubonic plague, malaria, yellow fever, and cholera. Diphtheria, that's diphtheria, or T-D-I-P-H-T-H-E-R-I-A. So let's go over that sentence real quick. It says that the European colonists and enslaved Africans brought with them deadly pathogens to the Native Americans. What they're saying right here is that, of course, we know who the European colonists are. These enslaved Africans, that possibly could be, once again, some Moors on their own will coming over here bringing some of these European settlers, and they're just calling them enslaved Africans here. Or it could be some Moors who lost some of the wars in Europe and possibly in small little numbers were transported over here. But once again, these Moors have nothing to do with us. So yes, they call us Moors, but they call us Moors being American Aborigines. So these enslaved Africans, that's all they really saying. Maybe it was some people taken from the Horn of Africa, in small numbers from some of these conflicts, because it wasn't Europeans owning these boats. You see, you got to remember who owned the boats and who had the navigation and things of this nature. And although they may show you it was some Jews, a lot of these Jews were mulatto, and they had mothers who were Caucasian, and they had fathers, and grandfathers who actually were Moors. Okay. So yes, it was so-called Jews involved in the slave trade. Like when they show you the movie Amistad, you see some of these Jews of Spanish descent, and they speak Spanish and things of this nature. Yes, that's true, from the areas of Portugal, Spain, the Iberian Peninsula, etc. But you got to remember, a lot of these Jews had Caucasian mothers and so-called black fathers. And that's the part they're not telling you. And yes, they had Spanish names, but this is the lineage of, of where they come from. They are, a so-called mixed type person. All right. But anyway, they said that they brought all these diseases upon the American Aborigines. Once again, you weren't used to these diseases. Okay. So this is part of the war. This is already the American Revolution started with the diseases. Disease toughened adventurers, colonists, and slaves invading the New World, thus carrying viruses and bacteria that consumed Indians or American Aborigines who lacked the immune resistance that forms from experience with the diseases. The results were catastrophic. Epidemics are one of the most powerful forces shaping history, and disease played a profound role in the decimating of the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. The diseases, far more American Aborigines or Indians died of contagions than from combat. Let me repeat, far more American Aborigines died of contagion than from combat. Let me repeat, far more American Aborigines died of contagions than from combat. So you know how they try to make you think that, oh man, they just came here and killed everybody up and it was just all these people. Once again, they had small numbers, small resources. It was too many people here. So a lot of these people were wiped out with diseases. And I also want to think a lot of sexual diseases were passed on too. And also too, I read somewhere else before that, a lot of these rapes and certain things that were happening when these Europeans were invading in some of these communities, that was the first time these people had experienced some of this stuff. As far as these type of offenses, like I said, diseases, just these different forms of combat, because it really is all form of combat. And then through the rape, you have the passing on of the so-called STD or the virus of whatever it was back then. Today we call it AIDS, but back then it may have been the bubonic plague. And this stuff is getting passed around. Let me continue. Where am I at? Okay. The social chaos caused by the European invaders contributed to the devastation of Aboriginal communities. In the face of such terrible and mysterious diseases, panic-stricken and often malnutritioned Aborigines fled to neighboring villages, unwittingly spreading the diseases in the process. Unable to explore or cure the contagions, Aborigine chiefs and religious leaders often lost their stature. Consequently, tribal cohesion and cultural life disintegrated, and efforts to resist European assaults collapsed. So you see a lot of it came from the diseases. Now I'm going to show you a picture right now. And in this picture, clearly, how these Caucasian artists will depict the people as looking white like them. We know that. But what I'm about to show you right now is really a picture of some American Aborigines or so-called black people and how they were looking from the diseases. Okay, when there was bodies just piled up and they were dying. Now these people look white, but just imagine them as black people. See the dead bodies, everybody crying from the diseases. Let me keep on going. Over time, American Aborigines adapted to the presence of the diseases and better managed their effects. They began to quarantine victims in infected villages to confine the spread of germs, and they developed elaborate rituals to sanctify such practices. So, we had to combat with a combative defense system, you see, and the immune system has to build up within from this biological warfare, because this was a biological warfare. So once again, so-called black people, like your war is an occult biological warfare, like these whole melanin wars, all this stuff they put in the water, like in Flint, Michigan, you know, the bad food they give you, you know what I'm saying, the cheap chicken, you know, the bad beers and malt liquor at the gas stations, you know, these bad cigarettes they put in your communities, just everything they give you, but it's of the lowest, poorest quality. Is bad. I remember the boy Bobby Hemmings said one time that in the malt liquor that they make, that shit really is like the foam and the gel that's left over at the bottom of the, we can say, the giant cauldron that all the beer is being brewed in. And then you'll have at the bottom, you know, the most densest particles in it that'll settle and turn into some type of matter. You know, you have the liquid matter that's separated, which is the beer. Then you'll have that gel type shit at the bottom. And then he'll say they'll even refine that shit and make malt liquor out of that. You know, and that man ain't crazy. They are doing that shit because, see, to the American Aborigines, it was always an occult biological warfare on you. This is why they came with the hard liquor and the moonshine and all those different types of drinks. They was taking what those Moors had, when those Moors over in Europe and in so-called Africa weren't using it for these purposes, but they was taking it and then diluting it more or making it just pure rubbing alcohol and drinking that shit. Because they was looking at it like it's getting us more drunk. Me saying they, as the European Caucasian colonists and serf class, you know, vassals that those Moors had over in Europa. You know, but they probably did let them get a little alcohol and stuff like that. So when they came over here to the New World, that's why these Caucasians were used to drinking already, because those Moors had allowed them to drink over in Europa. So they giving them the pure moonshine and all this stuff. And once again, the brothers here, you know, probably weren't really fucking with no shit like that. They more so was probably burning some gas, you know, had their little pack, you know what I'm saying, burning some gas. Or they had him a cigar with a pipe in it, you know, or maybe they have a little drink or whatever, or some kind of plant he was chewing on that got him a little, you know, buzzed up, but not that hard moonshine and shit like that. Like, you know, that shit crazy. Like, even like that Everclear shit, like, it's something in my genetics and it's something in my DNA that don't like Everclear, because every time I went to a house party and, you know, I drank the different types of drinks, you know, whenever I could tell it was like that Everclear type shit, like it was like this certain aftertaste that like even my brain felt. And it just was like, nah, like don't drink this shit. Like it's bad. And once again, Everclear is basically just pure goddamn, you know, fucking rubbing alcohol, basically. Y'all motherfuckers be mixing that shit with that blue Hawaii punch and all that. But at the end of the day, that shit ain't nothing but gasoline. Diesel fuel gasoline, basically. And my genetics don't fuck with it. And another reason why is because my granddad went to an early grave from the, you know, the chronic drinking and shit like that. You see? So on a deep level, you know, and then I got family members in too with the whole land thing and all that. So the same Aboriginal story, a lot of this shit being y'all personal lives, man, and in y'all genetics, and certain shit y'all don't be fucking with. Y'all don't really know why. Yeah, but that's why I don't like that Everclear and that super hard shit, because that's a lot of the shit that was used to poison our people in this biological American war, you know, that we know of as the American Revolution. But anyway, let me continue. Smallpox was an especially ghastly and highly contagious disease in the New World. Santo Domingo boasted about 4 million inhabitants in 1496. By 1570, By 1570, the number of natives had plummeted to 125. So damn. So I mean, in 1496, it was 4 million people, and by 1570, it had plummeted to 125 from the smallpox. In central Mexico alone, some 8 million people, perhaps 1/3 of the entire Indian or Aboriginal population, died of smallpox within a decade of the arrival of the Spanish. Smallpox brought horrific suffering. The virus passes through the air on moisture droplets or dust particles that enter the lungs of its victims. After incubating for 12 days, the virus causes headaches, backache, fever, and nausea. Victims then suffer or develop sores in the mouth, nose, and throat. Within a few days, gruesome skin eruptions cover the body. Death usually results from massive internal bleeding, just like that picture I showed you all. In colonial America, as Aborigines died by the thousands, disease became the most powerful weapon of the European invaders. Let me repeat. In colonial America, as Aborigines died by the thousands or the millions, disease became the most powerful weapon of the European invaders. A Spanish explorer noted that half the natives died from smallpox and blamed us. Many Europeans, however, interpreted such epidemics as diseases sent by God to punish the Aborigines who resisted conversion to Christianity. Now peep that shit. So not only have these folks came here on a biological occult warfare, sounded off on our ass, then because they already knew about certain Old Testament stories from Moses and the epidemics brought upon the Egyptians who had enslaved the Hebrews, them probably knowing about some of these stories through the Christian dogma that was given to them, because this is post 325 AD. They already got the white Jesus or not the white Jesus, but the Caucasian Jesus, you know, the Caesar Borgia and the whole Jesuit order image of God. They already got all that shit by now. So these people already, some of their more intelligent serf class people that have been around these Moors a little bit too much. They know a little bit more about this shit. So this is how they're rationalizing all this. Just like you had the other Caucasian Neanderthal Jews use the curse of Cain against Noah when he saw his father bear, and use that as a justification, as a rationalization to follow the American Aborigine Hebrews and always parasite off of them and try to use them and try to turn them into the Goyim class when they really are the Hebrew class. This is what they're doing to you. They know you are the real line of Judah. They know it's you. This is why they made the Wizard of Oz and made it the Cowardly Lion, because you cowered out when Hiram Abiff got put into his tomb. And this is also why with the Black Freemasons known as the Odds Fellow, they have a picture that shows the Cowardly Lion basically in defeat and them guarding the Ark of the Covenant. The Freemasonic lore. They know that you are actually Heru, the American Aborigine. So they like, nah, we're going to come with this occult warfare, which is called disease, you know, and death. All right, let's see where we're going now. Here we go. A clash of cultures. The violent encounter between Spaniards and American Aborigines in North America involved more than a clash between different peoples. It also involved contrasting forms of technological development. The Aborigines of Mexico had copper and bronze, but no iron. They had domesticated dogs and llamas, but no horses. Whereas Aborigines used dugout canoes for transport, Europeans sailed heavily armed ocean-going vessels. The Spaniards' ships not only carried human cargo, they also brought steel swords, firearms, explosive, and armor. These advanced military tools struck fear into many Aborigines. A Spanish priest in Florida observed that gunpowder frightens the most valiant and courageous Aborigine, and it renders him slave to the white man's command. Such weaponry helps explain why the Europeans were able to defeat far superior numbers of Aborigines. Arrows and tomahawks were seldom a match for guns and cannons. Now, here's the part right here. Some of that is true. You did have that. But I'm not led to believe that some of these American Aborigines, A, were just so friendly, like they say, and just so, warm welcoming and all that. And B, that they would logically go out into a form of battle with arrows and tomahawks when you clearly see that these people have another form of artillery. These people either A, I'm talking about Aborigines now. They either A, will use their resources to try to get some firearms of their own, or B, they came with another type of technology that may have been greater than a firearm to at least either A, combat it or even possibly beat it. Now, you know that history is written by the person who so-called won the war. When they didn't win the war, the shit is ongoing. It never stopped, you know. But this is how it went down. But I'm not led to believe, and I don't want you to think that either, that these American Aborigines, or these people that they call Native Americans, were in fields with bow and arrows and tomahawks, and these other Spaniards and Europeans have these steel swords, you know, these bulletproof, not bulletproof, but these certain type of vest and armor, you know, have the firearms and things like that, the rifles, you know, the gunpowder and the cannons and stuff. You know, how are these people building pyramids and have this whole other technology and civilization here, but don't have the common sense and the logic to see that this is not an equivalent battle? If I can see that now, 2017, you're not going to tell me that an American Aborigine in 1517 could not see that. I'm not going for that. I'm not going for it at all. So, you know, with some of this stuff, you got to take it with a grain of salt and use your logic to keep going. Check this out. Their motives were explicit. Said one soldier, "We came here to serve God and the king, and also to get rich. Like the French and the British after them, the Spanish who explored and conquered new worlds in the Western Hemisphere were willing to risk everything in pursuit of wealth, power, glory, and or divine approval. The first adventurers were often larger than life figures. They displayed ambition and courage, ruthlessness and duplicity, resilience and creativity, as well crusading religiosity and imperial arrogance." So let's look at this shit. Because see, this is how they're looking at their heroes, or who they call their Christ people. You see, their Jesus or their Jesuit figures or heroes or archetypes. Look how they say that they displayed ruthlessness and duplicity. I want you to think about those two words, ruthlessness and duplicity. You look in a lot of the history, you come across these accounts of these people like quote unquote Hernan Cortez, etc. And you come across a lot of these ruthless accounts. You know, these stories of women being held upside down. Shout out to my boy Razkaz with his song Nature of the Threat. You know what I'm saying? First, we need to truly understand the nature of the threat. The pale man walks in the threshold of darkness. You see, the first humans evolved with the phenotypical trait, genetic recessive. Albinism apparently was a sin to the original man, you know, but holding the women upside down, you know what I'm saying, that's pregnant, and then, you know, slicing their stomach open and watching the baby fall out and then stomp on it and everybody else watch it to, you know, put fear in them. This is where you get them stories from. This is what was going on in the American Revolution of the late 1400s, early 1500s. Look, I'm telling y'all, 1511 through 1514, 1508. These are the dates of the shit I'm talking about. February the 18th, 1519. Cortez's conquest, the first European conquest of a major Aborigine civilization on the North American mainland, began on February the 18th, 1519, when Hernan Cortez, driven by dreams of gold and glory, set sail from Cuba with nearly 600 soldiers and sailors. Also on board were 200 Cuban Aborigines, 16 horses, and several cannons. So even here you see, they say that Hernan Cortez came with nearly 600 soldiers, but they say that 200 of them were Cuban natives or Cuban Aborigines. So once again, some sellouts. You know, so that means he came here with 400 men of his own, and then you had 200 niggas here that was you know, piss poor about something, or just, you know, once again had some form of a self-hatred, and sold their birthright out. You know, when the invaders led at Veracruz on the Mexican coast, they were assaulted by thousands of Aborigine warriors. After defeating the Aborigine force, Cortez invited the warriors to join his advance on the Aztecs. He then burned all but one of the Spanish ships. There was no returning back. So we're now going into the whole battle with the Aztecs. Once again, this is all the American Revolution. This is all the American Revolution, man. The ruthless Cortez had participated in the Spanish occupation of Cuba and had acquired his own plantation and gold mine. So this motherfucker came here and just done took over all our shit and put us on the shit and made us work. Cortez launched the daring invasion of Mexico. The 200-mile march from Veracruz through difficult mountain passes to the magnificent Aztec city of Tenochtitlan, north of present-day Mexico City, and the subjugation of the Aztecs, who throughout themselves masters of the world, constituted one of the most remarkable feats in history. Now, once again, you got to take this kind of with a grain of salt. You know, we don't fully know everything that happened. Cortez entered Tenochtitlan peacefully and made the Emperor Montezuma II his puppet. Cortez explained to Montezuma why the invasion was necessary. We Spaniards have a disease of the heart that only gold can cure. Montezuma mistook Cortez for a returning god. See, this stuff, like I said, you gotta take it with a grain of salt. Nah, you ain't made nobody here. Ain't nobody made this puppet. Nah, ain't none of that went down. Because if that was the case, it wouldn't be motherfuckers like me talking. Because I'm these same people. I'm not led to believe that, man. I'm just not. I don't know about y'all, but I'm not. Then look at what they say now. After taking all the Aztec gold, the Spaniards forced Montezuma to provide Indian laborers to mine more. This state of affairs lasted until the spring of 1520, when disgruntled Aztecs regarding Montezuma as a traitor rebelled, stoned him to death, and attacked Cortez's forces. You see what I'm saying? Like, you have to like really look at all this stuff and let it come through, because conflicts go back and forth. You know, once again, like, you know, you just got to just read it right, man. Then check this shit out right here. It says, an African slave infected. The virus spawned the contagion. As a Spaniard observed, the smallpox spread over the people as a great destruction. So once again, just more. See, this is the American Revolution, man. Disease, death, rape, betrayal, theft. This is the American Revolution of the early 1500s. So when I talk about, you know, Muhammad Sanbu of Louisiana in 1511, this is why I say the American Revolution started in the early 1500s, because this is exactly when it started. Didn't I show y'all a picture of Montezuma on my other thumbnail? And even this guy Cortez, you know, he either was a mulatto. He more than likely was a mulatto. I'll leave it at that. He more than likely was a mulatto. But then it says, so then you have the Aztecs, you know, some of them, they fight back. It says there are 20,000 Indian allies that remain loyal. However, Cortez gradually regrouped his men in 1521, having been reinforced with troops from Cuba and thousands of Indians eager to defeat the Aztecs. See, look at this shit. And thousands of Indians eager to defeat the Aztecs. He besieged the imperial city for 85 days, cutting off its access to water and food and allowing a smallpox epidemic to decimate the inhabitants. And then it says an African slave infected the virus, spawned the contagion. So these people took African slaves, or probably some, you know, people from quote unquote Africa that may have been brought over here on boats, the few that it may have been, and were using them in biological warfare. Once again, cut off the water supply in the city and then put in a biological disease within the city. Because a lot of these things were airborne pathogens. Wow, man, this shit's something else, man. This is the American Revolution right here. Wow. And look at this shit. These bastards. It says, and thousands of Indians eager to defeat the Aztecs. This is what we're going to talk about and we're going to close. and thousands of Aborigines eager to defeat the Aztecs, and thousands of sellouts eager to sell out black people, and thousands of bed wenches easy to sell out black people, eager to sell out black people, and thousands of bed bucks willing to sell out black people. Wow. Let me show y'all how the Aztecs look. Just so y'all ain't got this shit mixed up. This is how the Aztecs look, people. This is the Mayans. But this is how they look. That's so-called black people, ain't it? That is how they look. That's how they look. The Westo Aborigines of Georgia, pictured here doing a war dance, were among the first Aborigine Americans to obtain firearms and use this to their advantage to enslave Aborigines or throughout Georgia, Florida, and the Carolinas. You know, it's like I was saying earlier, you know, we was getting weapons because it said right here we was using it against each other. So you mean to tell me we weren't using it against the European? It says a Westo Indian of Georgia. Remember, I was going into the Georgia history. You know, these more than likely are some Yamasees. They say obtained firearms and used this to enslave Indians throughout Georgia, Florida, and the Carolinas. And once again, these Indians could have been Native Americans. You know, those European bleached out, albino, Mongoloid, Asiatic people that call themselves Native Americans today. We was enslaving them, really. You know, and them and the Caucasian European. But this is the American Revolution because people, it was sellouts everywhere. Sellouts everywhere. Blood and guts everywhere. War everywhere. You know, once again, these are Native Americans. Now, these are not Aztecs. These are not American Aborigines. These are Native Americans right here. You see how these people look? These so-called like white men, but they Native American though. But they call themselves Cherokees. But these are the Native Americans. These are not Aborigines. It's a difference. These are Native Americans. These are not Aborigines. It's the boy Blackbeard. American Revolution shit. The war continues. Stay tuned. I'm out.